Okay, all right. So thank you for joining us today. My name is Ari Krzyzek. I am the co-founder and chief creative officer at Chykalophia. We help femtech brand who has D2C websites scale their brands and business online so that they can also, get more conversion online and able to scale their business. So that's a little bit about me. Rabia, why don't you go ahead and just quickly introduce yourself, and then we're gonna get into, the agenda for today.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm super excited to be here. My name is Rabia. I'm the founder and the chief designing officer at The Blue Creative, which is a creative design agency based here in Toronto. We mostly focus on branding, UX, UI design and development, and SEO as well. So a few things happening here, and we just help businesses with their online digital needs.
Wonderful. Random question, you guys. Where are you guys all at? I mean, like, I'm in Chicago, so I'm curious if you wanted to share, like, just real quick, where you're from, right? Just wanted to see. Okay, somebody share in the chat.
Aries,
You can, yeah, you can share in the chat, or even if you want to unmute yourself, just real quick.
Boston.
Boston.
Cool.
Toronto. I see Jason is Toronto as well. I'm Toronto as well. Canada. We're representing Canada here, so I'm excited. We're covering the North American continent here, so it's good. We have people from all over. We have someone from India, Mumbai. We have someone from Chicago. That is super, super cool. Yeah. Ghana. Right. Oh my God, so many different parts of the world. This is so cool. I absolutely love it.
A lot of people from different places. Okay, so today, honestly, it's going to be pretty straightforward. It's going to be pretty casual. You can ask myself or Rabia anything you want. We're going to share with you about 5 minutes in terms of our background and where we are today. And honestly, all things around being a freelancer to transitioning into becoming an agency owner or studio owner, all of those we're going to cover today. So fire up the questions whenever you're ready. Okay, you can raise your hand and then we can kind of see who are going to go first asking your questions. But if you're not familiar, if you're not comfortable raising your hand and speak up, you can leave your question in the comment and I'm going to monitor that for us today. Okay. All right, Rabia, go ahead and start 5 minutes and share a little bit about you, your background, and where you are today.
Yeah, so my journey, it is always just kind of crazy to think about when you're thinking about like all the experiences you've kind of been through. So just like a lot of people that I speak to, I did not start in the design world. So when I was in high school, I was thinking of like trying to figure out what to do next. And as a lot of us do, we go to our parents. We're like, what should I do in my life? Please help me, save me. My dad was like, oh, you should just study business. This is like, business is always going to be there's a safe choice. And that's what I did. I went and studied business. And that is what a lot of like my foundational career was in. So I did end up working in the corporate sector for a number of years, which was really, really great. I think it does kind of help you become a lot more polished and like helps you really grow as a professional when you are kind of in that that corporate sort of space. As good as it was, I just didn't really feel like I was really growing as quickly as I wanted to. And it wasn't just something that I was like super excited about. And I think that to me, even like at that time, I felt like it was really important. I'm like, I'm spending so much of my day at work, and the part about the people that I worked with, absolutely amazing. Like I really loved my team and I had a really, really good time. But the work that we were doing, it was just kind of very repetitive. A lot of just, I didn't feel like I was growing at all. And I wanted something different. And I was just like, okay, this is cool. And then just due to personal circumstances, I ended up actually moving to Pakistan for a little bit. And that was really exciting. It's a completely different world. I grew up in Toronto, guys, for anyone who is here. Yeah, my whole world was just in GTA and Toronto area. So going outside of that little bubble was kind of scary and really interesting at the same time. I learned a lot about how to work in like Asia. I was working on projects with the United Nations, USAID, and a really data-driven projects. And this was kind of the first time I started to really realize the power of, data and analyzing it and how it can be used for decision making. And I was just really getting familiar with like all the amazing things that you can do in data visualization. I'm like, wow, this is really, really cool stuff. It's like, if you have all this information and you're not really, synthesizing it or making sense of it, it's just there. It doesn't really make any. But once you actually patterns and start to it very strategically, it's really, really cool. So that was kind of the first time I was starting to think about more seriously about technology and how it's being used. And even at that time, I didn't really think about being in the design world or anything like that. It was more just I was starting to become more familiar with technology in general. And that I did for a few years. I worked in the humanitarian sector, which was really cool. And then when I came back to Toronto, I spent about a year and a half, 2 years almost. I was just trying to figure out what the next steps are. I wanted to do something that was giving back, because I started to realize that we're really, really blessed here in North America. A lot of things that we take for granted. We don't really think about simple things like water, education, all these things. So I wanted to create a project where I can sell t-shirts to actually support different charities that are working in those sectors. And that was my first time I was actually putting a whole project together, which was really interesting. I was kind of doing the designs for the t-shirts. At that time, Shopify was just starting out. So the years before that, while I was working, I was still learning a lot of the tools online. So I was learning how to use Photoshop, Illustrator, and a lot of the Adobe XD. No, sorry, Adobe XD didn't exist at that time, like a lot of the Adobe suite at that time. So I was learning how to do all of those things on my own. And yeah, I started to put a lot of these things together, which was super cool. And then I learned a lot more about business from just putting a whole project together. And I wasn't really thinking that this was something that I was going to do full time, but it was really cool, building partnerships, figuring out marketing for it, building the designs. There was just so much stuff happening that I was like, wow, this is like a whole new world. But I did start to realize that I need to get better and start to, figure out the customer, because even at that time, I started to realize that user experience is really important. And this is a few years ago. So user experience, UX design wasn't really a thing at that time. You weren't really, no one was saying that this is like the way that it is today. So at that time, it was more just like learning the tools. So as I started to go through this journey, I started to realize that I need to get better at like understanding the frameworks and the methodologies much better. It's not just about putting things on screen. There is a lot of thought that goes behind why you're doing what you're doing. And even during that time, I started to get smaller projects, working for family and friends. I started to work on, different projects, just doing things to improve my skills. Around 2000 and I think it was 16, 17, I started to realize that. So at that time, UX UI design was starting to really, there were a lot more boot camps now available, which wasn't the case like years before that. I decided to go back to a boot camp full time. 3 months, I was like, okay, I need to just take the jump. This is something that I've been wanting to do. I was like looking online for all of this stuff, but I wasn't really sure that this is what I wanted to do. So that's when I took the plunge. I'm like, okay, 2016, 17 was when I got really, really serious about the design world. I did do a 3-month boot camp. I learned how to do that. Then I did the UI design course for just the design course, and then I did a 6-month boot camp in development. So I learned all different types, like the sides of building a whole project. So I wanted to go do the design and development. And after that, it just kind of became more of a thing that I am officially a designer. I have officially gotten that piece of paper. I felt more like, okay, this is like my thing. After that, I worked on some really, really cool projects with, I worked on some mental health projects. I worked on like helping smaller businesses in the area. So it's been really, really cool. And then I started to formalize my business a little bit more. Even though I had like experience in this space, after getting that certification, I started to feel like, okay, you know what, I need to start turning this into a business. And it is still, I would say, still a smaller team. It's not a huge business, and I'm still learning every day. But that is kind of where that transition happened slowly over the last, I would say, 10 if you want to extend it. You can even say like 15-ish years if you want to really go back to like my high school date. But it has really been going, and this is how it just kind of transitioned from the business world into the design world. Now I do have own an agency, and then the other business that I am working on is the Accelerator Academy, where we do host regular workshops to teach others like all the amazing stuff that I've learned over the years. So that has been my crazy journey into this world, very like meandering all over the map, but I'm pretty sure a lot of us can relate to the crazy journeys that we've had into the design world. But yeah, that is high level of how I got to be where I am today.
Okay, wonderful. I was just replying to some people in the chat. If you went through a bootcamp as well, just like Rabia did, share it on the chat. And even if you have the link to it, the better, so that other people can also take a look at some of these different bootcamps that are available. Okay, real quick, I'm going to try to kind of do a quick version of my background. I'm, on the other hand, kind of slightly different than what Rabia background is. I started off as a designer. I graduated from an art school in Bali, Indonesia. Did not even know that I wanted to be a designer until I got a scholarship to tourism school. Ended up turning that down and just like pursuing going to art school. My parents like, what the heck, Ari? It's like, why this? If you know, right? If you're Asian and your parents like super into like making sure you take the chance and go to a proper school instead of art school, you probably can relate to my experience. But aside from that one, I just know that I want to be a designer, whatever that might be. I was just so intrigued by graphic design and advertising in general. So I went to art school and get my bachelor degree. And then right after that, I went to get my very first job as a graphic designer assistant. Now, finally, when I start applying all of those things I learned in college and everything, the real world doesn't really, it's not the same as what they taught you in art school. So I had to learn a lot of different things, but also experience a lot of different things as well around what do you really do as a designer in your position as a in-house designer, right? And then that was my first introduction around being a graphic designer and understanding, okay, what role do I really play in as a team? Like, how do I really present my concepts and my design to my fellow, like team members or even to my boss and getting that approved and so on and so forth. But I ended up leaving that job simply because, well, there are two things. My boss were honestly a bad person. So did not really get the respect that I wanted or needed. And the environment was very much toxic in that particular company. So I ended up taking that into an account. And also my husband, and back then he was my fiance, he asked me a very simple question. Ari, how much did you really get paid per month? And okay, this is in Bali, all right? So this is probably going to be a very low number for a lot of you, but I was paid $250 per month at a time. And this was probably about 12, 13 years ago. And he was honestly like, are you serious? You mean you add another zero at the end? It's like, no, just 250. But because of that discussion, he ended up introducing me to this world of like freelancing, right? Just get some work from the internet. And I didn't even know that was possible at a time. So I ended up doing that and also ended up like yet rebelling again and quit my job. I told my parents like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm just going to become my own boss. Like, so I ended up doing that. So got my, very small experience as a in-house designer and then went to freelancing. And a couple of years after freelancing, my husband and I decided that we're going to build a company together. He just like simply asked, like, would you want to become my business partner? It's like, so right after we got married, it's like, sure, why not? I was like, might as well, let's do that. What could go wrong? Well, a lot can go wrong, right? So that happened. And honestly, in the first 2 years of building a business with my husband, that was a total disaster. I'm going to just be upfront. It was a total disaster. We're trying to, step on each other's toes, telling each other what to do. He's a nerd. He handles all things, the business side, as well as all the development side of things. And I handle design. And we were telling each other what to do. It's like, you should code this way. And he would tell me, like, you should design this way. So just a lot of like, interesting interesting dilemmas that we were trying to figure out ourselves. And also at the time, I did not know how to really prepare for being a business owner, nor even like prepared as an entrepreneur, right? There was just so many different things I don't know, and yet we ended up doing and jumping into building a business together without a proper education, without proper plan. And I think that was the biggest mistake that I had. But we ended up figuring out, we had mentors, we had, a lot of different resources giving us insights about how do you properly create a business plan, and then also figuring things out for your positioning, your messaging, and even all the different systems that you need to know and prepare for your business to succeed. So there's a lot of different things that I've learned over the years because I did not prepare the business, right? I mean, in terms of like having a cushion or even like financial side of things, I ended up working as yet another in-house designer for Sears Holding for 3.5 years. On top of that, also work part-time with my own business while my husband, working in the company full-time. So there's so many different things that are not pretty, right? All the success that you see on social media and everything, there's a lot of hard work behind that you probably don't see. So I think this is going to be a really good time for you to ask any other questions around how did we transition from freelancer to an agency owner? Like, what are some of the pieces that you need to prepare if you are leaning towards that particular path? And what else is there? Like, what different things that you might not account just yet? Maybe it's around contract, maybe it's around setting up some of the financial stuff that you have for your business. What are some of those? So I'm going to open it up for questions. Raise your hand, and then we can go around and find each of you asking the question. Come on, guys, raise your hand. Oh, I see some. Vincent, go ahead.
Hello. First of all, thank you so much for sharing your stories. I find it really helpful. The question that I have in mind right now, as I am a senior product designer, IC for about 6 years or so. I've been doing some freelance here and there, but when I'm thinking about potentially starting up my own either freelance agency or something like that, I think the hardest part for me is figuring out my target audience, right? Like, it feels like everyone needs a website, everyone needs UX work. And so how do you identify a niche for yourself when there is so much competition in the space? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Go ahead, Rabia.
Yeah, no, this is such a hard question. And I'm still like trying to figure out exactly like who I am like super excited to work with. And it has been more of a meandering journey in that as well. So I'm going to be like showing you the good part and the ugly side of things. Because I have like for a really long time, I have worked with all the different types of like whichever type of clients were coming my way. I was like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And to a certain degree, it does work. Like if you have that experience and you're able to put together a digital experience for someone, that like there's so much just commonality between different, like even if you're like, as long as you're building like a web experience, then there's a lot of commonality regardless of like what kind of business it is. You can kind of take whatever, like if it's a grass mowing company versus a hair salon or a whatever type of company, all of the basic things that they kind of need, there's a lot of common ground there that it's okay that you can kind of transition from one to the next. So there is something to be said for if you are taking on different types of clients, that is totally okay. You are going to start to realize, and this is going to be more in the narrowing down of what type of client. And this is kind of more where I have become more specific, because when I first started out, I was literally taking anyone and everyone. And then I started to realize that there's bad clients as well. And you have to start to weed out the types of clients and become very like stern with your, okay, here's the minimum I'm willing to accept for a website, because everybody wants you to make a website for like $300, right? And you're like, this doesn't even pay for my lunch. Like, what are you saying? Like, I have bills, like I need to eat. Like, what are you asking for, right? So like, you need to become more specific in that. For me, over time, I have started to realize, like after working with all these different types of like businesses, I've started to realize that I like working with education related companies more, just because that's something that I'm super passionate about. I've worked with a couple of clients that were really good in that space. So for me, it just ended up being more of a trial and error. So I worked with pretty much all of the different types of businesses. And now I'm getting to a point where I'm now becoming more and more like niche and more specific about the types of clients that I work with. I still don't like officially put it on my website or anything. And maybe this is something that I should be doing. Like Ari has done a really good job of making really sure that she's saying that she works with like femtech businesses and she has a very clear niche. I'm still hesitant to do that because I'm like, I should do that. But in the back of my mind, I have started to like be more specific with like education-based businesses. So that involves like training and development, universities, colleges, even like early education. But like the general theme there is just the education industry. So for me, it just really did come from just working with a lot of different clients initially, different types of businesses, and then finding that sweet spot of like, where do I have experience? What are the clients that actually have the money to pay for you and your services? And they're not going to be like, because like I've worked with really early startup entrepreneurs, and that's where I was just like, I don't know if this is a good match for me because there's just too much friction. There's too much like not enough freedom for me to do the work that I want to do. So like after a little while, I was like, no, I have to have a minimum for how much I'm willing to like have as a minimum project. I want to make sure that this is the type of client. So I started to over time define my ideal client more and more. And it is still a work in progress. So I hope that answers your question. But for me, it has been more a trial and error. And then out of all of the clients that I've worked with, I've become very specific and like, okay, this is the type of client I like working with because they meet my budget requirements. They meet my like type of people that I want to work with. Like I wanted someone who is like educated and like professional and like not like breathing down your neck and like it's not a toxic environment. Like those are things that are important to me. So that was kind of the things that I was looking for in my ideal clients. And it seems that there's a lot of those in the education sector. So that's how I narrowed it down. Ari, how did you kind of go through that journey?
Yeah, you know what? Before I answer that, I wanted to ask Vincent real quick. Who are your target audience right now, Vincent?
Good question. So I am less concerned about getting paid at this point. To be honest with you, I think the pandemic has really made me reevaluate the type of social impact that I want to engage in. And at this point, what I want to focus in on are small to local businesses within my community. I think there's a big risk that COVID impacts them negatively. And so there's this tension of like, I want to help, but I also want to get paid, but also I don't know you have a lot of money. And so I think that in the beginning, it's going to be a little tough for my specific scenario. Although Rabia, which you mentioned, does make a lot of sense to me, right? Like in the beginning, you should be casting a wide net so that you can understand sort of what the opportunities are. And then over time, you can start to kind of develop like, here's my preference, I guess, out of my clients. But I'm still sort of at that cusp of like getting clients.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. What Rabia mentioned earlier, I did that as well. I mean, throughout the 10 years that I'm in business, I pretty much had a very naive purpose at the very beginning. It's like, I wanted to help everybody. Like, I want to design for everybody. I was like, no, don't do that. The thing is, there are going to be a very specific type of companies, very specific type of industry that you really are super interested in, or maybe you really want to make an impact in that particular industry, right? And Rabia also touched on there are bad clients out there. You do not want to spend, your sanity and also like sacrificing your mental health just to make someone who don't appreciate you happy. And the main reason why you're in here, having your own freelance, role or career, or even like trying to position yourself as a agency owner in the future, you have the freedom to choose whoever you're going to work with, right? And I think you hold a really big power in there. And going back quickly in terms of like niching down and positioning, I've thought about positioning and niching down a lot in the past 5 years, and I wish I had done it sooner. And I think the biggest thing that we always have in the back of our mind is there going to be enough work for me, right? The thing is, if you have a very specific industry and you're trying to really, stand out in that one industry versus multiple industry, chances of people working with you is higher versus like you in different and multiple types of industry, right? Here's the thing. When I say that I primarily work with femtech brands with D2C website, it gives me an opportunity to speak to a very specific industry. However, in the back end, right, whoever comes our way, if they are a good fit in terms of like budget wise, and we connect with them, and obviously like, well, maybe not personal level, but in a sense we like each other, right? We feel like we can have a good work dynamic, we'll work with them. They don't necessarily have to be a femtech. However, when I push those messaging out, I want very specific people. So you technically are not turning away like any other opportunities behind the scenes, right? But when you're really trying to position yourself in the industry, people need to look for one particular thing from you, whether it's on your skill set, whether it's on your target audience, whatever that might be, there needs to be one hook that they can remember. Who are you for? Or what can you do for them? What is that one thing? Hopefully that can give some clarity a little bit as well, Vincent.
Yeah, no, very helpful. And I don't want to take up too much time because I know there are other questions. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. I have a couple of questions from the chat. Rabia, how did you go about recruiting your initial team?
Oh, it was quite a journey. It was a really crazy journey. So one thing that I think I kind of got lucked out on was that my sister is kind of in the same space. So when we were kind of starting to grow and I was starting to take the same, like bigger projects that were like beyond something that I could personally do, she wasn't like recruited officially, but she was like, she partnered up with me. So I had additional support. Like the first person I think is like it's hard. I'm sure a lot of us kind of go through this, but it's really hard for you to be like giving up that control of allowing somebody else to work on the project and like still feeling comfortable enough that it's going to be delivered at the same level where you would be performing at, right? So having that, I think for me was a really big support because I could rely on her and we can kind of work together and still be able to deliver something that was really good. So that was the kind of initial of like first time I started to think about like growing the team. After that, it was more, I've had bad experiences and I've had good experiences and I've learned things along the way of what are the types of people that I like working with. I've come to realize that like having certain qualities, like that entrepreneurial spirit for me is really important. I want people to be very, they should be able to just take ownership of something. And it doesn't mean that you're not there to kind of support or work with them or whatever. It just, to me, it helps me out when the person is more independent. And that is part of the reason for why some of the people that I originally started working with were more independent contractors. So we were working together and I would hire them on a short-term basis. And then that slowly turned into longer term work together. So that was like the initial I guess growing of the team. And then since then it has grown quite a bit and it has taught me a lot about like the types of people I like working with. What are the qualities that I look for? I think that's really important because you think that there is like, I don't like people, like there's just different types of people and there are different types of works, like ways of doing work. So I think over time, what I've really started to learn is that I have a particular type of people that I can work very easily with. And there has to be that like back and forth. They take ownership of the work as much as I do, and people who are very passionate about design. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're like the best designers, like skill wise, because I really do think skill is something that you can learn over time. But it's more the softer skills of like, are we able to get along? Are we able to communicate with each other? So having that, I think really does make a big difference for me when I'm like, I've been growing my team over the last few years, is having that. And I do slowly kind of build it. So it hasn't been something that happened like very, very quickly. Slowly over time, grew from like 2 to 4, 4 to 6, like it just over the years has grown. So that has really been like my thing. But I think having that initial support, for me, it was really hard for me to let go. It is so hard to let go of that control. And I still struggle with it. I still want to get into the XD files and I want to still do the work. But I think that has been really my journey into like trying to figure out this whole recruitment process. And I'm still learning from it. There's still parts that I wish I was better at and be able to kind of be there and support the team. And I'm still learning. Yeah. So I hope that answers your question.
Wonderful. Thank you, Rabia. I went through a similar journey like you did as well, Rabia. The big thing that I ended up doing was that first I thought having an intern would free up my time. That was wrong. That was honestly wrong. So if you really need to, find someone that can help you free up more of your time, don't get an intern. Okay. And then at least hire a junior designer. I think that would really help you. And over the years, I have, worked with so many different designers until I really find my very first designer that I bring on board as my full-time designer. And he really did stood out in terms of like the way he's delivering his resume. I mean, everybody else has sent me like this very plain document in PDF, but he sent me a whole PDF of a magazine format with like his portfolio and very unique style in terms of like presenting your own work. So I thought that was really cool. And throughout multiple occasions when I hire designers, what I look for really is the way they think of certain design, right? The way they utilize their skill set as a designer to present the concept, or what makes them really pick a certain type of style for a specific project, or how are they able to translate from brand guide into multiple types of design that maybe are not even included in the original brand guide, right? How do they expand that aesthetic or from the brand design into something new? I think there are so many different ways to do or even to find the right designer. I think it's gonna all come back in terms of like, what do you need and how do you want to nurture all of these people under your leadership? Because I think the biggest thing that I had done in the past, which I thought was good, was to just like let everybody do their thing, which was honestly, it was not a good idea because they want someone to lead them. So if you are planning to grow your team, you need to have a specific skill around leadership as well. You need to figure out how to manage these people under you and also showcasing that leadership for them. So that means you need to show up for them and help them really get to the point where they can really grow in your company as well. I'm not sure if that helps. So let me go back to, I think that was Avery. Avery, if that works for you, just let us know. Or if you have more questions, just shoot us over on the chat. The next question I have from the chat: how did you find clients and how did you convince them? Ooh, Rabia, want to start?
Yeah, this is a good one. And this is something that we're going to be covering later on as well. Yeah, initial clients, I think, are probably the hardest to get. And that's where you're going to be suffering a lot from imposter syndrome. Even if you've been doing this stuff for a while and you're like, oh, I know what I'm doing, there's still this like voice in the back of your head. You're just like, no, don't bother, don't talk to anyone. You just need to like stay in your little corner and don't get out of that. So how do you find the clients? I think a lot of my, well, not so initial work really did come through family and friends. So a lot of it was just like using the personal referrals, just because that was something that was started to happen organically when people started to realize that I was kind of getting into this design space. And I'm sure a lot of you, when you tell someone you're like a designer, they'll be like, oh, can you help me make a website? It's like a very common thing. A lot of people will ask you, because especially nowadays, I think it has grown even more. Every time you tell someone that you're a designer, like it is something that's very much a common thing. So you will have people that are in your immediate circle that are in need of some sort of services. So one thing is that you have to just let the world know that you are in this space now and you're officially a designer. You just have to start like speaking to people. So family and friends, like, if you have siblings or whatever, let them know, okay, I'm officially like starting my journey. If you know anyone, just pass that contact on to me. I'll get in touch with them. So that's one way of like really basic. It's not anything fancy. Just let the world know that you exist as a business owner. You're ready to take on clients. I think that can be a really great way for you to get started. It can be a local business down the street from you, or, someone in your family and friends circle who's just starting a new business. That can be a really good foundational piece for you because it helps you really grow your own confidence. What you can do is also create a sample like landing page for a local business, which can be like an example. So if you don't have a portfolio or whatever done right now, and you're really, really just like super early in your career, you can actually like reimagine experiences and have them as a way to kind of showcase your skills and show like, okay, this is how I would do it. You do have to be careful with that. You don't want to tell someone that their website is not looking very good. So you have to kind of do this technique more strategically, and the way you present the work and the way you talk to people. But it can be a great way to also showcase like, okay, this is how you would reimagine something, or this is how you're going to be, getting that work done. So that would be one. And also just like getting speaking to like your local business owners, right? So if you are going to go and get your haircut, it doesn't have to be anything fancy. Like they are a business, they're a small business within your area. When you're getting your haircut, just have a conversation. You're sitting in the chair for like half an hour or whatever it is anyways, you might as well. So places that are in the area and these people have seen you around, like they know who you are, they're much more willing to talk to you because they've seen you around and they know that you're someone who comes to that area all the time. So they either know, like they might have needs themselves, or they might know someone who actually needs services in the area. So it can be a really great way. So I actually got people like contacts from when I was getting my hair cut one time. The lady's like, yeah, because they come into contact with so many people like on a daily basis, even if they themselves don't have like particular need, like if they're not looking to get their own business website done or whatever, they know a lot of people because they're sitting in a very central like hub sort of place, and they get in touch with, like, come into contact with a lot of people. So if you build that relationship, so find other key people within your community that are connected with a lot of people in the surrounding areas. So like restaurant owners. So if either you know someone who's a restaurant owner, or if you go to a restaurant or a coffee shop down the street that is in the local area, you go and get your coffee all the time, you've made friends with the barista there or whatever, they're more willing to have a conversation with you. It's not awkward, it's not weird. Just let them know, be like, oh, I just recently started my own business, I'm looking for more clients. If you don't have anyone, here's my contact information, just let's connect. So it can be a really, really simple, easy way to do it before you start going crazy and start going on social and starting to make it into a really big thing. It doesn't have to be super crazy. You can just connect with people in your local area, or you can connect with like just family and friends around you, and that can be a great way to get a couple of clients. I hope that answers your question.
I like that. Thank you for sharing that, Rabia. On top of what Rabia already shared, a couple of things that I did in the past is to go on a networking events, right? Obviously, right now, today in pandemic, depending on where you are, you might still have that opportunity, or it's all completely on digital networking. But when I started the business, a lot of people, my mentor and people around us, were just telling us, you got to go networking. It was like, oh, okay, fine, I'll do it. But I feel like, as a creative, it's really hard to put yourself out there. If you're one of those people, was like, I would just honestly challenge you, just go to at least one networking event in a month. Just challenge yourself to go out there, and you'll be amazed in terms of like how you can build connection with people and start slowly building your network, right? These network are going to be the people that will be helping you in terms of like supporting you along the way, and also doing referrals for you. That's how I built my business in the past. And the thing is, because I started off as a freelancer in the past, I already have some clients, although it's not much, right? Probably it was only like 5 clients at the time, but I already have a starting base. And if you are in a similar position, you can leverage your current clients right now and then tell them, hey, I have a great news. I'm, currently building a new business. Tell them what are your capabilities. And even if they're not going to be your client, right, they might know other people in their current network right now who could potentially refer business to you. So make sure that you still keep in contact with these people, because they could definitely still be able to help you along the way. Even though they're not going to be clients, they might be going to be, people who will support you along your journey. And on top of that, if you have a specific target audience that you are targeting, I would go and find or even research a couple of different either networking events or organization tied to this particular industry. So for example, if, most of my clients are in femtech, I go around and researching any organization that also help femtech businesses, femtech founders, or, femtech accelerators, things like that, so that I can be in that particular circles. So you need to be in, present yourself in front of them and make sure that they can think of you whenever they're going to have any campaigns or even like any business needs around what you could potentially offer. So wherever possible, be in front of them, whatever that might be. It could be on social, it could be on, these digital networking events, or even like speaking in front of them. Maybe it also could be, showcasing some of your content on LinkedIn, or even like, being invited into speaking on a club on Clubhouse. So there are so many different ways to do this and find your clients, right? You just need to be a bit strategic in terms of like, who are these people? I think that's the very, very much the foundation you need to know. And then how are you going to go about and find these people? Where do they hang out? And how can you be, on top of mind for them? All right. Let's see. I see there are a couple more questions. Let's see. Rabia, what kind of qualities do you think someone need or should work on while building their agency so that they can be a successful agency owner?
What skills do you need? I think one would be you have to get organized. I think for me, that made a really big difference, is just being able to strategically think about what is a priority and what is not a priority, and not just have too much busy time and you're doing things and you're not really sure why you're doing the things that you're doing. Really being like very strategic about where you're spending the time and how you're spending the time, right? Like, I think that does make a big difference. So one of the skills, and I'm still struggling with this is by no means like something that I've mastered, but I think having like being really organized with like your week, and you're going to become that person who actually has a calendar. Like when you were younger, you used to make fun of those people, but like you become that person. Like you become so organized and you're like, okay, now I need to be that person who actually knows, like has everything in a calendar and like has like specific times for what you're doing. So I think time blocking for me really did help, because when you go from like high school days to university days to whatever education you're doing, every time you have this like a 1 hour class or a 3 hour class, and then as soon as you're done, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but like this was something that kind of struck me as weird, is that once you're done like your formal education, you don't have time blocks anymore. And this is how you are used to kind of just doing things, like setting time aside for a particular topic. So it really does help you like focus on that particular thing. If you have, okay, I'm spending 2 hours on like XYZ task for today. Like having that, I think organization really does make a big difference, and like being able to actually get the tasks done, and like have strategic times for your meetings, you've everything like organized. I think organization is one big thing. The other thing is like really mental, like mentally getting out of your own way of wanting to do everything. I think for a lot of us, we do kind of struggle with all, just because you know how to do something doesn't mean you should be doing everything, right? Because there's only so many hours you have in a day. You have to learn to figure out, here's a priority, this is what needs attention, and this is where my time can be best spent, instead of trying to do every little thing in your business, because you're really going to become the bottleneck in your own business if you keep trying to do everything. So you have to learn to delegate. That is a skill on its own, like, and like letting go of control of trying to do everything on your own. I think those are some of the key skills that I would say. And just going back to the organization front, like having standard operating procedures that the team can follow, I think really does put a very solid foundation for you to be able to have something that works for you in how you do things, and then able to give that to others as well, so they can kind of follow that pattern, or have templates and like have everything organized, and that this is step 1, 2, 3, and here's how you're going to get the task done. I hope that answers. There's quite a few things, but those are some of the top ones that come to mind.
Yeah, I like all of that, Rabia. I also feel like, every one of us, we have different skill set and also different strength, right? I would challenge you to go to Gallup Strength Finder and really analyze, okay, what are my top strengths and what are some of the things that you can honestly just let go. You probably already know that inside your heart, right? And you just need some validation in terms of like, okay, things that you're really good at are this. And then the other things, right? You could probably either hire that out or, outsource that so that it doesn't take too much of your time. Because as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, especially running a studio or agency, you're wearing so many different hats, and there's gonna be a time where you have to decide, where do I need to spend my time, right? Because you only have 24/7, and I think all of us do. There's so many things in your checklist or your to-do list, but there's only going to be a very specific things out of those checklists that you can only do. The rest, maybe your team can do it, maybe you can outsource that. So use that as much as possible. So go to Gallup Strength Finder if you can. I think the test was like $35 or something like that. But honestly, it helps you really look at what skill sets do you have and what are your top either 5 or your top 10 strength. And then the rest of them, it's going to make sense for you to outsource the rest of those, skill set away. Okay, so the next question, hold on, let me read it. Okay, how do you manage to, okay, I screwed that up. Let me try one more time. How do you manage saying no to potential clients if you're too busy to take on their work, but want to work with them in the future?
Oh, that's a hard one. That is a hard one because I have like, especially when yeah, it's something that's really exciting and I really do want to take it on. I have such a hard time saying no, but I guess it is something that you have to be honest with the client, because if you are really, you don't have the manpower or the capacity to take it on, it's much better for you to be upfront and honest about your like capabilities at that point in time, and then to take on a project that you're not fully ready for, mess it up really, really badly and ruin that relationship forever, right? So this is the way I kind of like to think about it. And I usually try to be just upfront about it and be like, okay, this is really great. Right now we have like this much work going on, but I have tried to like hire more people if I'm anticipating that, based on if it's going to be starting in a little while, what are the people that we need to have in place to be able to kind of take something on. If the client is okay with like, if they don't have an immediate need of like, we need to get it started like right away. And that is possible to do if you let them know, okay, we will be adding some more capacity or whatever. I just usually just like to think of it as what would be the level of like communication that I would want if I was like trying to bring this to someone and I want to get the work done. I would never want someone to be like doing a very terrible job and then just wasting my time, because that's not fair to me. It's not fair to the team. It's not fair to everybody involved. So it's much better for me to just be upfront and honest about the situation. Let them know, okay, this is too much work, or like we just don't have the manpower to be able to do it right now, but we do have capacity that we're building. Would it be something that we can get started on a little bit later, or figure out a time frame that works for both parties? If they're okay with it, then that's fantastic. If they're not, then I think it's much better to let that client go for that particular project, but let them know that we will be happy to take you on in the future. Like keep that relationship going and build it, because it's much better to have them as someone that they can come back to you and have another project with, than to mess up the project and burn that bridge forever. That's kind of the way I see it.
I agree. And I think that was very beautiful that you said that. Is honestly, be honest. I mean,
Yeah.
they will appreciate like you are being honest with them, rather than it's like, you take on it and then you end up just like scrambling in the back end and just really honestly trying to figure out and make everybody happy, right? So whose sanity are you going to sacrifice? And you have the option to do this as well. And the way I'm thinking about it as well, if these clients, right, or this specific client coming to you really wanted to work with you, I think you're gonna figure out a way to work with them one way or the other. They're either gonna wait, or they're either gonna figure something out with you. But I would say, yeah, just be upfront and just tell them, it's like, hey, currently we can't take on more projects, but yeah, we'll be happy to support you maybe in the next 2 months when we free up a couple more a couple of projects and wrapping those up. So things like that, right? But yeah, all the things that Rabia said and mentioned earlier, that was all spot on. All right, so I think we have 2 last questions. The next one I have here: how do you divide your time? What are the things you prioritize in the beginning?
How do we do? Okay, so my time has really, like the division of like my work and what I do has really shifted over the years. And I think the biggest difference has been in me actually doing the work, like being in the Adobe XD or Figma files and trying to do the work myself, to really switching it over to where I'm now more focused on the business development side of things, or bringing in the new clients, or being the face of the company, or going to these events and bringing in new business. Like, I do a lot more of that work now, and being more like building my social presence, building my own personal brand. Like, I do a lot more of that now than I did when I was really early first starting out, because at that point, I was the one who was kind of doing everything. I was the branding business development person, and I was the UX UI design person, and everything else person too. But now that I have figured out a way to have more support in those areas, now I feel like my time is more spent on the development of the business, or figuring out what the next steps are, or where we're going in the next 5 years, or like how can we grow as a entity. So the time has really, the like how I allocate or spend my time, the activities have really changed over from when I was really, really early in my business trying to figure everything out, to now I have more of a, I guess, defined role. Whereas in the beginning, it was just, I was basically doing everything. So it has over time become more defined, and I'm more clear about like what is my job description as a person who's trying to take the business to the next level. So I hope that answers your question, but really the work that you do really does change over time.
Yeah, same. I think in the beginning, especially the first couple of years, right, you're gonna wear so many different hats. I think we mentioned that a little bit in the beginning. And a lot of the time, your time are going to be split between going out there, right, networking, or marketing your company, making sure that you get the words out about who you are, what you can do, and around your business capabilities. And then you also are the one doing the work, right? So I feel like as a designer, I remember spending up to 8 hours a day just like doing the design. And that is a lot of time in terms of like production wise. But over the years, you're going to start seeing the shift, like Rabia mentioned earlier. There are going to be the time where you're slowly handing off some of these work towards maybe your junior designer, or maybe even like people that you're going to hire for doing some of the social media posts and things like that. And you're going to focus more around the relationship building with your clients, nurturing that particular relationship, and also building up new plans and strategies for developing the business, or the business side of things. So I would say the first couple of years, you're going to expect that you're going to wear so many different hats. But then throughout all of that journey, you're also going to see and feel which out of all of these hats that I still want to carry on in the next couple of years, like which out of all of these hats that I want to let go and let somebody else handle it for me. So you're going to still wear a lot of those though throughout the rest of the journey for building your business, but you no longer need to be the one doing the actual work. You're not going to be the one in the production, in doing revisions anymore, right? You're going to oversee some of that to make sure your quality is still going to be top notch, but you're going to have a lot more time figuring out, how do I grow the company? How do I scale, or even like, nurture that client list that you have right now, so that they can go out there and also advocate for you. Okay. All right. The last question that we have here is, could you tell what are your metrics? Wait, hold on. I think there are two. Sorry, guys. I think the question keep coming in at the last minute. All right, I'm gonna go to Jack Wang first, because I think she or he send it out first. As you're finding your first clients, how do you price your project so that it makes sense on both sides?
Okay, so this has been a learning curve, just like everything else for me. And it has been, so I've decided that like over time, so initially I wasn't really sure of like how to price myself, which I'm sure a lot of us can kind of relate to. And then I didn't really have like minimum of how much I'm willing to accept for a project. So that is something that has changed over time, because there are still clients who would ask for work to be done for like, I want a whole website, which is going to take me like 3 months to make. I want it for $500. Like that still will be the case. But you have to figure out like what your minimum is, and it's okay to just like stick to that. And that comes from me like setting okay, this is how much, this is like the minimum that I'm willing to accept. And if the client is not able to make that budget, and it's okay if they can't, this is something that is very much a business decision, I'm going to have to just say no to that. So I've set like minimum standards for how much I'm okay with if it's going to take me that much time, this much in resources, this much in how much I minimum want to make profit off of this. Because when you are looking at having so many people involved, it's not just about like just your own work and time that you're spending. Like you want to be able to compensate the people who are working with you well. You want to be able to make sure that there is like enough cash flow like coming in that you're able to survive as a business. Once you as a business owner have those numbers, you're going to start to see a pattern of like, what is the minimum that I can sell this like project for? This is how much is going to take me in the like number of man hours, development, like everything else that we're doing for this project. You'll, once you start to get into the projects, you'll get a pretty decent sense of like, okay, this is roughly, this is how long it's going to take us to put this thing together. This is the amount of people that are going to be involved. You will start to get those numbers. And I think having those numbers and then being able to stick to that is really going to be something that you'll have to learn to do. And if a client is not able to meet like that minimum criteria of like, this is how much is my minimum asking price for a project, then it's okay for you to say no to those projects. So I hope that kind of answers your question. But from a business perspective, like you'll start to see the numbers. This is how much XYZ is costing me. This is what my total is going to look like at the end of the day. Once we're done, this is how much time it's going to cost me. You will start to see that this is how much it is. And then for, you may want to like figure out what is the minimum profit you're willing to earn as well, right? Not just the hard numbers of this is how much you're going to pay out, but actually like this is the minimum profit. And there's a book called Profit First. I don't remember the name of the author, but he actually kind of explains it in a really nice way, is that like you shouldn't really just be looking at everything that is like the numbers of the expenses that are going out. You also have to figure out that you need to be able to make a profit. And that is on top of you, like just every, like, why are you even in business otherwise? Like, what are you doing everything for? Like, if you're not making any money. So you need to have all of that accounted for, and that will give you a really good idea of the numbers that you should be looking at. And that comes, like, you get much better at pricing projects once you've had experience. And I think for me, it was more of a learning curve, and it still is. Sometimes like you do take a bit of a hit, but you have to learn to, you will start to get much better at pricing the projects once you have those numbers and you have some experience in the space, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Rabia. I think when you started off as a freelancer, I remember I'm just honestly just trading hours for the work, right? And you probably are doing the same way right now. But as you start transitioning into becoming, an agency owner or a studio owner, what Rabia has mentioned earlier, I would definitely start thinking about how much do you really need per month, right? And then also how much expenses do you even have right now? And what are the number for the profit you really want at the end of the day, right? For after all of that expenses, after all of that, resources, or even everything else, maybe you're using stock or any other subscription that you have in order to support the project. What is the number look like, right? So I think all of those, Rabia probably have some sort of like formula that she's probably going to share in the future. But, all of that Rabia mentioned earlier, I would highly follow that particular steps and formula as well. Thank you for sharing that, Rabia. Okay, so we are at the top of our hour, honestly. We already passed 2 minutes. If you guys need to go, feel free to jump out, but I'm just gonna quickly answer the last question. Well, now there are 2 last questions. Okay, let's see if I can quickly answer this. How do you negotiate on your budget for the projects? Negotiation thing. I don't negotiate, to be honest with you, especially when it comes to, really owning and understanding your numbers, right? When you do have that numbers, you're going to have to say, just like what Rabia mentioned, hold the fort. Like, this is your minimum pricing, right? In terms of like negotiation, if you negotiate with a client, I think there's this really interesting, I'm not going to say battle per se, but it almost feels like you can't be confident about how you're going to deliver the project. When you start negotiating, that's what typically going to, start being perceived by the client, because they are able to influence you to get a lower number or things like that. So I would honestly don't negotiate when it comes to, talking with the clients. I would honestly do this instead, like really talk about the value that you're going to bring in. If the clients really just need a logo and you feel like I don't do just logo, then you need to let them know in terms of like your capabilities. The main reason why you don't just do logo is because you need to maybe go through a discovery to understand really like the brand story, the brand mission, and all that different things, so that the business not only going to get a logo, but a much deeper, I guess like an understanding of their brand that they can use on different aspects of the business. Maybe it's for messaging on their marketing, or maybe for their PR, or even their website. What are you trying to bring into the table for this particular company? So help them really understand what it is that you do, so that they don't really question, why is it so expensive to just spend on a logo? It's more than that, right? So you don't negotiate, you actually talk to them in terms of like, and educate them, like what it is that you're trying to bring to the table and how you can deliver that for them. Rabia, anything else to add for negotiation?
No, I think I think you got most of the points there. And yeah, that point around like be more value based, not just dollars and cents, because that's where you can really make the client understand that this is not just like random colors that you're picking out of thin air. And like there's a lot of thought and process that goes into place. You can actually talk about the process and like the number of man hours that it takes you to actually do the work, right? It's not just one thing that you're going to pull up in 10 years. And it's not even just about the thing that you're going to be putting at the end of the result. It's you yourself as a professional have spent like 10, 15, 20 years, however long you've been in business, learning these skills, right? So you have to learn to value yourself and the time that you spent learning it. There's a lot more. So like you're bringing in a lot of experience. So you need to just be very confident about the experience that you're bringing in, and don't take that for granted. And if you like, I don't think there should really be a lot of negotiation happening, just the way you're saying, Ari, just because like it just, the more like there's just so much in the design space, there's just so much subjectivity, and you can really like go at a really, really low number, and you can go at a really, really high number, and there is no exact formula for what the price in. And this is part of the reason for why it's so hard to price things, is that because there's so much variation. Like you can get a logo for $5 and you can get a logo for $500,000 million, right? Like there's just so much work, but what makes it different is the value. So you need to talk more from a value perspective, not just the dollars and cents, because that's not really capturing the true essence of the work that you're really doing. So I hope that answers your questions.
All right. Last question, guys. Okay. For those of you who are still in here, thank you so much for still hanging out with us. I mean, last one. I think after that, we can ready to wrap up. Okay. The last question we have here, how do you define the deadlines for a project and buffer time for the same? Also, how do you deal when there are last minute changes, which leads to much late delivery of projects? That is coming from Oshal Urade. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. She's being tricky, or it's a he? She. Okay, you guys are being tricky. There are two questions in there, but do you want to answer that, Rabia?
Yeah, I can take a stab at that. Defining deadlines, I think you do start to get a good sense after you worked on a couple of projects, how long something is going to take you. So that does come with experience. I usually do like to leave some extra time. I don't like to like have it to the brim, just in case, because there's a lot of dependency, especially like if your client doesn't send the stuff on time, or like any of the communication that is happening, like they get busy on their time. You want there to be enough like buffer room of how much time is going to be for you to be able to, be able to deliver that project successfully and on time. So you need to leave that buffer room in there, even if you feel like you can get the stuff done in like 3 days. Don't tell the client you're going to be able to get the stuff done in 3 days. And the other thing is that once you've done one version of that, if you look at it a couple of days later, you're going to be like, okay, here, I can improve these things better. So it's okay to give yourself that extra time, or like even just as the overall project, to have that additional room for you to make the revisions or things that you felt like you could do better. So it's okay to have that additional buffer room, and make sure you guys are just budgeting that in when you have that first initial conversation. And then the last minute changes, if there are minor changes, I'm not too fussy about that, because to me, building that relationship is more important than being like really nitpicky about every little thing. Like I don't like being that annoying person. So I would much rather just be like, okay, if it's little things, but you do have to learn to set boundaries. If you keep giving a lot of value, like you will start to realize when somebody's going overboard with that. We usually have a clause in our initial contract saying that any hours spent outside of the original agreement will be charged on a hourly basis at X amount of dollars. So then we can just let them know, okay, this is going to say it's going to take you an extra 20, 30 hours of work. That's a lot of hours that you could be spending doing something else. If that's what it's kind of coming to, then make sure you just send them like a request for approving that ahead of time. Be like, we're happy to do this work for you, but this is how much it's going to cost you. Do a revise, like make sure you get approvals. That's super, super important when you're making that change, that like you're going to be charging them for that extra work that you're doing, and then go ahead and do that. But have that ahead of time before the project even starts, that if it does end up going over what you had originally agreed upon, and now you're changing like basically the terms of agreement, then you already have that clause put in there ahead of time. So it's not like an unusual conversation. They already know that this is something that will happen if they go over the hours. So I hope that answers.
I think that was definitely very clear in my opinion. Just one thing that I would add to that, having a project timeline and then, send that just for you and your team, as well as also sending it for the client, will be very much helpful as well. Just look at both of the sides, also can see where are you in a timeline right now, right? And if there any conversation around, hey, how come the deliverables has become, it's coming out later late compared to the timeline, you can at least back that up because, there's a lot of revision around X, Y, and Z time. And we were able to, consolidate that and resolve it in a proper time. So there's gonna be a conversation that you can always share with the client, and having a timeline that you both agree on could definitely help back up some of the maybe like some complaints along the way. I mean, I know that happens to me in the past, but being very honest and transparent and communicate all of that to your clients, I think is a very, standard thing to do, obviously, as a professional, right? Or even like as a business owner. So make sure you loop in every step of the way. What I also feel happen sometimes is that when clients feel like, okay, the 2 revision is not enough, and just like trying to push a lot more revision on you, I would do the same thing like Rabia mentioned. If it's only small little things, you can tackle it within just like a couple minutes, go do that and maintain the relationship. But if it's beyond that, you need to let them know that, hey, something like this is gonna be additional charge, and you let them know how that's going to go and how that's going to work for them. All right, so I think that is pretty much all we have for today. Thank you so much for all of you who have been enjoying and joining us throughout the whole thing for this hour. Well, 1 hour and 11 minutes now. Okay. Make sure to follow Rabia. She is on ADPList, and she also, pretty active on Instagram as well and Clubhouse. Make sure to follow her. If you have more questions around this, feel free to reach out to her. Same thing if you feel like you want to reach out to me as well. I'm pretty active on Clubhouse and Instagram as well, so you can find me there, or even on LinkedIn if that's what you prefer to. But yeah, we hope that we can connect with you guys again later. We're going to follow up with something, special later on. We're going to follow up with everyone, and we're going to also share with you the workshop that we're going to have around this exact topic. So if you want to have more insights and, honestly download some of our templates, or even like all of the process that we have, it's all going to be in that particular workshop. So we're going to send that over to you via email. Anything else to add, Rabia? Oh, you're on mute.
No, this has been so much fun. Thank you so much for each and every one of you guys who have joined the conversation. There's so many people who are still like here, which is amazing. That means you were actually getting value out of this conversation. So I'm super excited that you guys stuck around. And yeah, definitely, I already see some LinkedIn requests coming in. So I will be speaking to you guys soon. And yeah, definitely feel free to reach out on Instagram or Clubhouse. I hope you guys are going to be joining us on. We do like quite a few conversations there. So I'm super excited to stay in touch and, be able to offer as much value as we can. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Enjoy the rest of your Friday and have a wonderful weekend. Bye.
Bye, everyone.